Hey everybody, this is Curtis from PSNStores.com, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at Touhou Genso Wanderer. This is the second of two Touhou games that is set to come out next week on March 21st. So this is the kind of roguelike one of these games compared to Double Focus, which is a bit more of a Metroidvania. So very different games. This is a lot bigger game too. This is something that you're going to be investing a lot more time into. In my other save file, I've logged over like 30 hours into this game over the past week. Still not finished. So hoping to get a review of this game up as soon as I possibly can. But it is a very difficult game, and I'm trucking along as best as I can, is all I'll say. So we're just gonna start up a new game. This is on a different profile, because I figured it might just be best to kind of show the opening and the tutorial, and that might be the best way to kind of show off just what this game is and what some of the different mechanics are and things like that. So as I said in the video for the Touhou Double Focus game, if you're not familiar with what Touhou is, just in the descriptions for both of these videos, I'm just going to have a short little synopsis, just to give a brief overview, because it's a pretty, there's a lot to cover if you really wanted to get into it. I'm not super familiar with it either. It's something that I feel like over the past year and a half or so, I've started really hearing a lot more about these Touhou games, and so these games really are kind of my introduction. They're fan games, so maybe they're not the best introduction. Maybe you'd want to go with the actual like official Touhou games, which from my understanding are more like bullet hell shmups, which I do want to track down at some point. They look interesting. But it's my way of being like, okay, I want to know what these things are. I want to be able to talk about them intelligently, at least some of these games. So we'll just let some of this intro scene run. This kind of sets up the story. Basically there's this guy, he's got this golden sphere, and you're gonna see our main character. She's like wanting to look at it, wanting to inspect it, and he's not really comfortable with that happening, and things kind of go wrong. We'll just let this go. I wasn't expecting when I started this game up for there to be like these like 3D cutscenes. Obviously they're not maybe the most like super impressive, you know, compared to some of the stuff we see nowadays. But even still, like I kind of like the look of it in a weird way. But there's full Japanese voice acting and everything in this. It's Alright, so we'll go ahead and skip from there, but that's kind of a general intro to that cutscene. We got some more stuff here which we'll skip ahead. So there's a brief little sequence here where you're like going up against this guy, trying to stop him. He's gonna kill you pretty quick though. So we'll go ahead and end that. And this is gonna bring us into the tutorial. So this is a roguelike, pretty standard roguelike game. I'm sure most of the mechanics are probably gonna seem pretty familiar to you if you've played a lot of roguelikes before. There's some interesting stuff they have going on in here. But, I mean, really, the things that you should know, this is a really challenging game. This is a game you're going to die a lot in. And the way it's set up is, I mean, for me, most of my deaths have come towards the end of long dungeons. And so I've lost a lot of progress, or sort of, it depends on how you look at it. You go through these long dungeons that can potentially take a good deal of time to get through, a few hours to get through them. And I'll reach, I would reach the boss of that dungeon, and basically what would end up happening is I would die, and so I would have to I could restart the dungeon at level 1. But the thing that really helps that, the thing that kind of lessens that blow, because it can be really demoralizing. But luckily, the thing that does help is that you do keep all of your items and you keep your equipment. So you get weapons and shields and stuff that will level up as well and get stronger as you progress. And all of that stuff you get to keep. So luckily, with each additional time you try to go through a dungeon, your equipment itself is still going to be getting stronger and stronger. So it's going to make your chances even just a little bit better the next time that you retry it. So it does help kind of lessen the blow. So here we're going to just kind of go through the tutorial. It's basically a good way of just running you through a lot of different features here. So I'll try to explain as much as I can. And then hopefully we'll hit the hub world and I can kind of show a little bit of what that's all about. So first and foremost, just HUD stuff. You know, bottom right, obviously that's the floor number. There are 6 floors in the tutorial. Bottom left is your currency, that's yen, and then there's also Nido points, which we do not have unlocked. You're not going to get until a little later on in the game. But that basically encompasses crafting. It encompasses being able to basically take weapons and merge them together, or just different pieces of equipment, merging them together and making something stronger out of it. And then there's also like alchemy and stuff that you'll unlock as you progress through the story. But we can look at our status right now. So pretty simple stuff. We'll probably need to equip some things. And this is our inventory. So in dungeons, there are different parameters. There's different kind of things a dungeon will allow or prevent. So in this tutorial dungeon, you can have up to 20 items. It seems to me that most story dungeons that I've been inside of so far have allowed up to 30 items, but there are other dungeons that it's like it caps at 20, some stuff like that. So right now we just have this big red bean cake, and that's going to increase our tummy, which is basically your hunger meter. As once that hits the 0, you'll lose HP really quick, and then of course green tea. But you know, we have different tabs, so it's like weapon, shield, talismans, kind of your standard potions and stuff. There's these cards that are kind of like magic abilities in some ways. Your food, some different things like that, materials for crafting. And you know, so you'll move along this kind of grid with the D-pad. You can actually go, so you can look at the backlog. If things move a little too quickly, if you'd like to see specifically what kind of damage you're doing and other things that are happening, you can do that. There's some game settings. Chronicle Gaiden is basically like a bestiary and things like that, so we don't have that unlocked just yet. And from there, we'll just kind of go. You hit X to attack, so right now we're just punching. And so what this is saying, you know, we can explore, and as you see, as we're exploring, the map is going to get filled in. But one thing you can do, you can hold circle or R1, and if we do that and hit in a direction, we'll just kind of like instantly kind of do a sort of a smart travel that will kind of go through certain key points of a dungeon really quickly. So it makes it a little easier if you're like going through a dungeon again and you just want to quickly speed through some early floors, you can do that. Although really from what I've been playing, I feel like you owe it to yourself to ensure that you explore every single floor as much as you can and fight as many enemies as you can, because you don't want to reach the final boss of a dungeon and be like really underleveled, especially considering, I mean, story-wise, like those story dungeons have taken me 3 to 4 hours to get to the final boss, and like if you die because you were underleveled, it's gonna be kind of a bummer, for sure. And so these magic seals here, these basically act as passages to the next floor of the dungeon. So now we're gonna get into fights. So one of the things it explains very early on is like, so if I move left, this other enemy is gonna move left, right? But one thing you can do is you can attack to kind of draw the enemy towards you. And then we can fight it out here. That can be really useful because sometimes if you get to a room and you see, hey, there's like 4 or 5 enemies, instead of letting you surround them, or letting them surround you, I should say, what you could do is you could kind of stay in this passage, right? And you could just draw them into you so you could fight them one-on-one. It just makes your chances a little better. You won't take as much damage, right? And the last thing you really want to do is be surrounded by enemies in a game like this. So again, that's kind of one of the things that it makes a point to teach you, and I really appreciate that. I think this game overall, you know, for as tough as this game is, and roguelikes, I would say notoriously, are pretty difficult, and can be overwhelming in some respects. This is a game that I think the tutorial does a pretty good job of kind of teaching you not just how to play the game, but also some interesting, maybe beginner level strategies. Just the concept of enemy placement and saying hey, you should lure them into a more focused area, that way you're not surrounded. Just simple stuff like that, I think, are things that maybe some people wouldn't think about. And so here, that's what we're gonna do. So there's a few things you're noticing. I'm leveling up quick because it's pretty early on. So I'm level 2 for my character. But you also notice my weapon is now level 2. And so again, like I was saying before, all of your equipment retains its experience even after you die or you quit out of a dungeon. It is specifically your character or any party members you have. Their levels will reset. But all of the progress you make as far as your equipment is concerned, all of that stays the same, which is really, really nice. Because if that wasn't the case, oh my goodness. I don't know if I'd ever beat this game. So let's keep going. So basically what we're running into here is now we're in a room, there's a bunch of enemies. We don't really have a way to lure them into a passage. We're going to get surrounded pretty quick. However, luckily, we just picked up this spell card. And this one's called a Fantasy Seal. So one of Reimu's spell cards deals damage to all enemies in the room. So pretty simple. And we'll just go ahead and use it. You get that cool character artwork shows up. And that should take out pretty much every enemy. There we go. Gain a level. So here it's explaining power. So you see my character portrait in the top left. Underneath her, it says power 8 out of 8. So basically it defaults to 8. That's where it starts when you enter a dungeon. There are certain enemies or traps that you'll run into that could potentially decrease that power. But you can also find or craft potions that will allow you to increase your power. So as it shows here, power can increase up to 15, and the higher it is, the more damage you deal. So that is another thing, that as you're working through the dungeon, you want to ensure that you're increasing your power as much as possible. You want to be able to hit that 15 by the time you're at a boss fight. And then, so I think it actually gave me, yeah. And there are similar things you can do with your health and your tummy. So if your tummy or your HP is maxed out or full completely, there are certain healing items or things or items you could use that normally would restore those meters, but if they're full already, they will give you an additional 5 or 6 points to those meters. And now we got Aura Mitama. So this strengthens a weapon of your choice. So we can go ahead and use that on the Patrol Tengu sword. Now it's +1, which is nice. So one thing you'll notice, if you look at the stats for attack 3 +1, power up limit is 7 currently, and that will increase as you level up the weapon. It tracks kills and stuff, and actually you can check seal. So what we have right now is each weapon has certain other, or even any piece of equipment, I should say, has this. So yeah, for this one specifically, we have additional damage up. And superhuman boost. So basically, like, for this, increases additional damage. It's pretty self-explanatory. But superhuman boost, after moving floors, you'll be inflicted with superhuman for a period of time. And then that will last 5 turns. And so actually, what, you know, we won't see it in this video, but when you do unlock the kind of Nido point system, and you're combining weapons together, what will happen is not only will the plus whatever number to your attack increase, depending on what weapons you're combining together, but you also might get more seals. So eventually you might have weapons that have like 8 or 9 of these things, and they're all like different variety of like, oh, maybe you do more damage to ghost type enemies, or maybe you'll do more damage to another type of enemy or something like that. So you'll see a lot of that too. And so eventually, you know, as you build it up, you'll have these really nice, like, beefy weapons with a lot of cool stats tied to them. Here we have gaps. So gaps are mainly items that are used to store other items. This goes into detail. The gap system is still something I haven't quite wrapped my head around completely. At least as far as to, like, I feel like I am not using them maybe as much as I should, I guess. So to use gaps, place items inside them. So there's a preserve gap, which lets you hoard items and keep them safe from accidents. Soul gap, if you place an item inside, you'll recover status effects with full HP. And then transform gap, if you place an item inside, it'll turn into a different item. And so, like, they're just weird things, and like to get the item outside, like to get the items back, you throw the gap against a wall or against an enemy. I don't know, like I feel like I should probably, it's one thing that about this game, I feel like I should be using gaps more, but I'm not. But it doesn't necessarily seem like it's making it harder. It just, I don't know. The gaps are like the one system in this game that I'm still not quite sure of the best way to go about using them. So let's go to the next floor. Alright, so we just got some P items, so now we're going to talk about, or it's going to explain your Danmaku gauge. Which can charge up to 30, and this is our different magic or ranged attacks that we have, which can be really, really useful, because sometimes you might want to keep your distance between you and an enemy, and so in that case, we have some Danmaku that we can do. So we'll skip through some of this. We basically have 4 different types. You see it's this kind of rotating through right here on the top left. The simplest one, just at 1 cost of your P item, is the yin yang shot. So if I use that, it just kind of goes straight forward, hits an enemy. You then have yokai buster, which is basically like it goes in 3 different directions, right? We have a sealing needle, which I don't have enough to use right now, but it goes straight forward, except it pierces through enemies. So if you have like a lineup of like 3 enemies, you can use that to pierce through all 3 of them and do damage. And then you have double barrier, which does damage all around your character. And again, that stuff definitely is pretty useful when you consider that there are times when you're going to want to keep range between your character and an enemy that you're fighting. And then now we'll go ahead and we'll kind of go through the different kinds. As you saw there, I'm just kind of piercing through these enemies now. And then there's double barrier. And next floor. So here we run into our first party member that you can get. You can bring like one partner with you, and they'll kind of follow you around. You can issue commands to them. So you can be like, okay, I want you to follow me, or you could command them to just kind of explore the dungeon on their own, or you can say, hey, if enemies approach, feel free to go ahead and fight as well. Don't just stick with me. You can kind of go out and fight enemies too. Or you can just have them hang back, and you can take care of business on your own. So again, we'll kind of skip through this scene. And we're getting pretty close to the end of the tutorial. So again, just simple tactics stuff. You just go to status, and there's your tactics options. So please follow me, fight with me, do as you please, or wait there. This will show equipment. We got some abilities on the right side, and then stats. And I don't think we actually have... Yeah, not yet. We'll get some stuff to equip for Fudo pretty soon. One thing to note is, as far as your Danmaku, your magic, double barrier, like all four of them, like with the exception of double barrier, if it hits your partner character, they will take damage. Double barrier is the one exception because it does damage to everyone all around you. That is the one exception where your magic won't actually hit your partner character, which is good because if you want to kind of keep them tagging alongside you, it's a nice thing to not have to worry about that. Alright, so now we got some stuff to equip for Fudo. So another thing, so you can actually dual wield certain weapons. There are some weapons that you have to do two-handed, but sometimes you can put a weapon in right hand and left hand. Partner characters can't, but that is something that you have the option of doing. One thing I also like, so these are pretty basic weapons right now, just a little sword. They've got a stick. Let's see if I can get it to... And an umbrella for a shield. But as you level them up, and as they progress farther as weapons or shields or whatever, when they reach certain levels, I think it's a certain level, I'm not entirely sure, sometimes they will change form. And so like in my current save file, like I've got a shield that is just like this super awesome like Gundam looking mask like head thing. Another one of my shields is a looks like just like a bouquet of fruit. So it's pretty cool. Like you get some pretty interesting looking equipment and like weapons and stuff as they level up and get stronger. Oh crap, I didn't mean to switch. Oh well, that's fine. So like, as far as my experience with the game on a whole, again, I've put a little over 30 hours into this game the past week thus far. I am on the second story dungeon. If trophies are anything to go by, they seem to indicate that there are 3 story dungeons altogether, and they're pretty lengthy. And then there's also like a bunch of other optional side dungeons that you can unlock too. It is tough. It is a really hard game. Again, like I said, most of my deaths have come from the boss of the story dungeons. Currently, the second dungeon I'm on, I've gone through twice. Both times took me like 3.5 to 4 hours to get through. Probably closer to 3 because I took some breaks every once in a while. Left the game set idle, so probably closer to 3, I would say. But both times I ended up dying on the boss fight, and it is heartbreaking. It is really, really heartbreaking, but again, because you get to keep your equipment, that does lessen the blow a little bit. But yeah, like I said, it's a really hard game. it is something that if you're going to get into, you know, just know going in that you're going to die a lot, and be prepared to get used to that. Like, that's an okay thing. Death isn't necessarily the worst thing in this game. There's still ways that you can be making progress. So, but that said, like, I do think, so sometimes you can actually, like, cut through walls to get things. Anyways, so that concludes the tutorial. We'll be able to take a little bit of a look to, for like kind of the hub area. So when you finish a dungeon, you get this battle result screen. It'll show you your playtime, your score. Although I don't know necessarily what score does. I think there might be... I'm not sure. I'm not entirely sure what score ultimately gets you, if anything. Turns taken, the money you got, different things like that. I will say, like, honestly, the worst thing that's happened to me thus far in this game was just last night. I was nearing the end of the second story dungeon. I was like a couple floors away from the boss, and things were looking good. Like, I had a pretty good setup. I had my power level at 15. Both my characters were doing all right. I had, you know, my equipment was really good. My main character had a really great sword that was like close to level 60. It was like, you know, it had like plus 60 some to its attack as well. Like, I felt pretty confident, and then I ran into an enemy that knocked my sword out of my hands. And I guess before I realized it had happened, because, you know, the combat can go pretty quick in this game, I guess before I realized it had happened, it had picked my sword up and threw it at me, which did damage. But I guess all I can assume that it happened, because it happened very quick. My only guess is that in doing so, the way it would happen if I took an item or a weapon or something and threw it at an enemy, it would do damage, but then it would just break, or it would disappear. And so here was this weapon that I basically had for almost the entirety of the game. You know, close to 30 some hours that I had put a lot of time into to upgrade it and level it up and make it really strong. And in an instant, it was gone. And it's probably the most demoralizing thing that's happened to me in this game. And that's saying a lot, because some of these deaths against bosses and dungeons has hurt pretty bad. But that said, so here's kind of the hub area. We'll again skip through some of the stuff. Here's some things you can look at. You can manage your Nido points. Again, we haven't really unlocked that though. So, but you can look at the Gensokyo Chronicle, and that's kind of cool, because this shows you all the different dungeons through the game. It'll show your playtime, turns, kill counts, total income, etc. Shows you every time you've attempted a specific dungeon, the difficulty level of that dungeon, every time you've cleared it, and stuff like that. And then you can look at conversation records. This shows all of the different cutscenes that you've seen, and there seems to be quite a bit. And then you can look at this here. So if you saw, remember when I did one of my special attacks, had this cool little like character artwork show up on screen. So that's the same case for enemies. When enemies do special attacks, something similar will happen. And as you see those, you'll unlock it here to be able to see. And like, there's some pretty good stuff. Like, the artwork in this game is pretty well done. Like, it looks good. You know, and actually I kind of like how this game looks anyways. But yeah, like, that stuff is pretty cool. So you have that. This here is kind of a training area. So this kind of gets into some of, this puts you in situations where, so like here, the Sage's training facility for beginners, 10 floors, it's very easy. But there's a few different types of these that you can go through, and it kind of teaches you maybe some more advanced stuff. It doesn't guide you in the way the tutorial does, but it puts you in situations where you'll just learn through just doing them, how to handle different situations. And then here is kind of a orientation, She goes over more advanced stuff. Now that's a bit more tutorial-esque in the way it handles that stuff here. And I don't know if it's unlocked. No. Or here it is, yeah. I think after you beat the first story dungeon, you can actually enter here. It's a it's like an insanity difficulty 99 floor dungeon. And then you can also, I've also unlocked a dungeon here that's like normal difficulty, and it's got some stuff going on. Both of those seem to be optional. And then here is a storage. So we can deposit things, we can withdraw stuff. Now, we don't keep any of the items from the tutorial, but once you actually start the game proper, all of those items and everything you will keep from dungeon to dungeon. The only thing that doesn't carry over is your character level. That will always reset to level 1 whenever you start a new dungeon, or when you die, or anything like that. That says, so that is Touhou Genso Wanderer. I think that's probably a pretty good look at this game. At least the first parts, first like half hour or so. Again, I am hoping to get a review up of this game as soon as I possibly can. The only thing that's prevented me from doing so is that it's very hard and I can't beat this dungeon I'm on right now. So, maybe you've played this game before. If you can offer any tips or advice, I would love it. Because I am enjoying this game, even though it oftentimes feel like it is trying to just deliver crushing blow after crushing blow to my soul. Not just by killing me, but also by taking away my weapon that I worked really hard on. I'm still enjoying it. I think this is a really well-made game. I think, you know, like, this is... I think it's a good game, you know, and it is definitely very, very hard, and it can be very, not necessarily frustrating, it can be very demoralizing when you do die and lose a ton of time. But that said, I'm still enjoying it, and I'm still wanting to play it. I really, if nothing else, the more times I die, the more I feel motivated to conquer this game. Like, I don't want to let this game defeat me. I want to power through and beat it. And I think I can do it relatively soon. Again, I just going, if you just look at the trophies themselves, it seems to indicate that there's not too much more for me. It seems like there's just one other story dungeon, and then once I do those, I'll check out some of the optional stuff as well. But other than that, I am enjoying this game. It is very, very hard, so if you pick it up for yourself next week, just know that you're gonna die a lot and be okay with that. And that said, thank you for watching as always, and until next time, I'll see you later.